welcome to the Leadership Unleashed podcast this morning. And for this episode, I'm delighted to be joined by Kim. And now Kim, as well as being a hugely experienced business leader, best-selling author, you're also the founder of Authentic Achievements and have done over 600 interviews. And I know that many of the listeners today will have been touched by your authentic achievement. So I'll just pause there and hand over to you to give us a bit of insight, a bit of a flavour of your background and some of those pivotal moments that have got you to this place today.
Bless you. Thank you, Stuart. And thank you for having me on the show. I'm so very grateful for the opportunity. Everyone knows bizarre career paths. That I left school at 15 to be a hairdresser. That's all I ever wanted. Set my own business up at 18, and then at 24, lost the feeling in my hands and legs as a result of an allergy to perm lotion. So complete career change, could no longer do what I set out to do, had to sell the business. And I got 15-hour a week temporary contract as a cashier in a bank while I worked out what on earth do you do when your dream is suddenly no longer your reality. And so that started me into a 25-year career in financial services. I then moved into IT software. I made it up to the board, convinced that someone was going to find out I was just an ex-hairdresser, really kick me off, which never happened. But it was one of my big concerns. And then I was very blessed to have my little girl late in life. She's going to be 8 next week, and that was my real pivotal moment to start to think differently about myself. So I'd spent many years suffering with imposter syndrome, never accepting what I was able to achieve, always thinking I would get found out, that I didn't deserve it really, that there was something else. And I knew that wasn't the legacy I wanted to leave for my little girl. And kids don't learn what we say and what they do. They learn by who we are and how we are. And so I vowed in that moment that any opportunity came up, I would take it. Whether I knew how to do it or not, I would take it and I would learn on the job. And in that last 8 years, I've been super lucky. I've gone on to be a 3 times international best-selling author. I'd done a TEDx. I was honoured to be nominated for Woman of the Year. All things that I could never, ever dreamed would be a reality. And I guess for me, that was one of the reasons for creating Authentic Achievements, which was, it was only when I stepped into being authentically me and being not unafraid to share that, because I was afraid. I was afraid every day.
Yes.
Being afraid and doing it anyway. That actually things started to change, and you started to see the impact that you could have. Because I think for me, one of my reasons for being is to try and add value. I get to the end of every day and go, did I add value to somebody today? And hope and pray that the answer is yes. I did add value to at least one person in my day. And it was a big journey for me to stop trying to be what I thought everybody expected me to be. In corporate leadership, as you had to be a certain way, I spent 25 years
Is it great?
thinking that navy blue was adding some colour into my wardrobe.
Which
So like everything's blue, black and business-like, and that's just not, it's just really who I was. But having the courage to be fearful and do it anyway. I wish I'd learned.
Very brave, isn't it? It's a brave move.
Yeah, but it was interesting because so I had a coach probably about 12 years ago now, and I was convinced I was given this coach because I was hopeless at my job. So that's where I was in my space, hopeless at my job. So I got this coach, and he says to me, what's going on? And I was like, I'm hopeless. And it was like
a negative as opposed to a positive. It says not doing the job, but rather than it being an opportunity.
Absolutely. So I was convinced that's why they'd given me this coach. And he said, okay, so tell me what's going on. I said, well, I'm just not really doing my job. And he went, okay. He said, would you have any evidence of that, Kim? And I was like, no, I just know I'm not. And it was like, Okay. Is there any evidence that you might be good at your job? And I'm like, no, nothing. It's like, okay. Do you mind if I share with you some facts? And I was like, anything. I just need help. So whatever you've got. And he was like, right, so are you not in your fourth consecutive quarter of double digit growth? I'm like, yeah, I am. And he went, okay. And do you not?
Right.
Yeah. Said, do you not have the highest employee engagement in the entire global organization? And I went, I do. And he said, and in fact, is your employee engagement score not higher than the 5-year aspiration? And I went, yeah, it is. He said, did you not just win Leader of the Year? And I went, yeah. He said, so because this box, I said, do you still think you're hopeless, don't you? Wow. Great. So you can see the disconnect of what's happening going on in my world. So he set me a challenge, and I recommend this to anybody listening or watching. I promise it's really eye opening.
Yeah.
I had to go and talk to speak to colleagues, friends, family, people that I know and trusted, and say, can you please give me really honest feedback as part of my development? The 1 or 2 areas that you see are my strengths, and the 1 or 2 areas where I get in my own way. And then what came back from all these people, almost unanimously, was I was brave and fearless. And I was like, I don't get that. I don't understand. I live in fear of being found out, fear of getting it wrong. So I had to go back and ask for clarity. So I was like, I don't understand. Can you please help with that? Kim, you will literally up sticks and move somewhere where you know nobody for a job you're not convinced you can do. And I was like, well, that's brave and fearless. I thought it was flighty and a little bit stupid. So I'd spent all these thinking everybody thought I was flighty and a little bit stupid. And they'd spent all these years thinking I was brave and fearless.
You were brave and fearless, yeah. And I must say, actually, Kim, just listening to everything you've said there, the 2 things that stand out, brave and fearless, thinking about your story, where you started, obviously that, the real challenge along the way and the journey that you've taken. And then obviously, that having your daughter and,
Yeah.
I mean, what an age, 8, coming up to 8, that's a very special time in her life, and great to be a mum as well. I mean, I've got 2 kids, my 2, Lucy's 14 and Oliver is 11.
That's ages.
And yeah, great. They're really good. And you said about value.
Yeah.
One thing you can always do is add value for your kids every day. And that's a really positive thing anyway, isn't it?
Because they're always watching, aren't they? Yeah,
they're always learning.
And I sometimes I hear Scarlett play something back, and I'm like, wow, that's so great. She came out of a friend's house a couple of years ago, and one of the other children, there was 4 or 5 of us there. One of the other children had a little bit of a meltdown. We kind of all left, and Scarlett just came out and she went, well, Mummy, that behaviour wasn't very appropriate, was it? That's definitely me. Definitely. I think children give you that real eye-opener to the fact that we are always leaving an impact. Whether we're leaving it consciously or not, we are always
always having an impact. Yeah, definitely. And I can resonate with what you said a little bit, because my background, I've had a couple of challenges along the way. I was born partially deaf. So I actually went to school early to develop my communication skills. I had to learn to lip read and all of that good stuff. So that was a little bit of a challenge. And then a bigger one was I got epilepsy in my teens, which has never gone away. So subsequently, I've never been able to drive and various things like that, which has had, believe it or not, a huge impact. I know people talk about, why don't we stop driving? But actually, in terms of the decisions that I make and have had to make, and it's had a huge impact because, just thinking about where you live, you need to live somewhere that you can get to places that you need to be. So in my case, early days, it was I need to be near to a station so I could commute into the city and various other things. Obviously, now I've got kids, it's about how do I get them to places so I can't live out in the sticks. And so I can sort of get your story in that respect, and then also your experience of corporate life. Again, for me, I mean, when I first started out, talking about epilepsy was a no-no. I mean, I remember getting offered a job and then sharing that information, and the chief exec asking his PA to have a chat with me to suggest that it wasn't the right job for me.
No.
And this is many years ago. So I was very, tentative, cautious about sharing that information with people. And I remember going to work for a big corporate and then having a little moment, and everybody was really shocked because it was like, well, where did this come from? But then over time, you learn through building relationships. And comes on to the topic a little bit that we're going to talk about leadership and authentic leadership. There was a woman that I worked for who was so authentic, as in so true to herself, that her approach to that was completely different. And she really opened up this whole thing, a little bit like you've just alluded to there, about being true to yourself and being open and honest, and trusting people to get you. And if they don't, well, it's their choice, but you've missed it, as in you're not going to get the best of me, sort of thing. So there's a lot in your story, which is a hugely impressive story. I mean, that's a real wow. There's a lot there, isn't there? But there's bits of that I can certainly connect to. So I guess I just want to ask this question, and it's become more of a hot topic over the last few years, certainly in the later stages of my career. Is authentic leadership, is it really the real deal, or is it just another trend that we like to latch on to and say, oh, great, great leaders are authentic? What are your thoughts there?
It's a great question. And I think for me personally, the leaders that I have admired most in my career have been the ones that have been authentic. However that is, some of them have, I had one leader, and whenever I tell this story, people go, oh my God, Kim, that's a horrendous leader. And I was like, I lived him. He would literally physically put his hand over your mouth if he didn't want to hear what you were saying. And I get that that's not the best leadership in the world, but you knew exactly where you stood.
Yeah, you know where you are, don't you? Yeah.
He always used to apologize afterwards because he was like, okay, I didn't, because I used to take that as I've not communicated it effectively because he doesn't want to hear it. So I need to rethink how I've communicated it so that he does want to hear it, because he needs to hear it, because it's important about where the business is going. And he would always accept it when I readdressed it later on. And he'd always apologize and go, I'm sorry, I gagged you again, didn't I? I was like, yeah, you did. Yeah, you did. But it's okay because it helped me learn. And whilst I'm not suggesting to anybody that that's good leadership, we should be all out there gagging people. For me personally, it was knowing where I stood and not wanting to second guess. So I've had lots of leaders that weren't authentic, and I wasted so much of my time and effort working out what was wrong because there was a something that didn't fit. And that's just weren't being themselves. And so once I realized that, and it was probably late on, I was in my early 40s. And I went for probably late 30s. And I went for a job interview. And the group people said at the very end of it, Kim, if you could sum yourself up in a word, what would it be? And I looked at her and I was like, loud. And she looked horrified. I was like, loud? And I was like, yeah. Thank you for like 50 minutes. Do you think I'm loud? And she went, well, actually, yes. I said, brilliant. In that case, it's self-aware and it's honest. I'm going to stick with it. And she's, that's what got you the job. So for the first time in 15 years, I didn't have somebody telling me that they were self-motivated or they were driven or they were any of these things. It was something that most people would probably go was not a strength. And I said, to be fair, I walked into that interview and went, it's going to be hard enough to do this job and do it well without pretending to be something that I'm not.
To be something that you're not, absolutely, yes.
So if loud isn't what you want,
then it's best to know now, isn't it? Let's not go on the journey. Absolutely. Good for either of us.
That's it. And so for me, I think I think with a lot of these things, they become a trend. But I think when we pull it back, I mean, we look back through history, the people that have inspired the most have been the ones that have been authentically themselves.
Yeah, yeah.
Because then we know what we're getting. We know the hand we've been dealt, and therefore we can
You can deal with it. Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And I similarly to you, there's people who I've got affection for, who my leaders in certain situations. And if I think about some time when we were in a crisis or a big challenge, and a bit of emotion comes out, so we get together in a room, and there'd be a few expletives, and there'd be some loud voices and all of that sort of stuff. But you'd leave the room, and it'd all be, there was no hidden agenda. It was all out on the table. And to your point, there was times when you could give it, and there was times when you took it, but you left that room, and everything was just cleared, and there was no, nothing, there was no baggage that went with it.
Right.
A little bit like, your example with your boss sort of gagging you and stuff. There's times when, I mean, obviously not like that, but where the leaders come up and said, "Oh, I'm really sorry, I shouldn't have said that," but it's just, everyone has their moment, don't they? There's a moment when the emotion just comes out. It's something that they are known to do. You can deal with it. They're honest enough to say, "Sorry, guys," and you move on. It's when it's not that transparency that causes the challenge and the undercurrent, and the sort of toxic environment starts to build up. I mean, I was actually, just before this, I was looking at, where the term authentic comes from, and it's actually a Greek term, which is it's authentikos, which actually translates to genuine, which sort of says it all, really, doesn't it? I mean, all the things you've mentioned there are all about being genuine. They're about being yourself. I guess another question on the back of that is, how do you know if if as a leader, if you're not being genuine?
Oh, great question, Stuart. And I think for me, and it's I feel it that
Yeah.
there
As
are,
in yourself.
yeah,
Yeah, we're not genuine, you would feel it.
yeah. So it doesn't feel right. And I start questioning myself. Why have you said that, and why have you done that? Where have those bits come from? What's causing you to not say how you feel? Because I think for me, that level of, one of the things I think is the most important, as well as authenticity in leadership, is curiosity. And that curiosity about self and others. So I question myself and say, well, why am I doing that? Why am I so convinced I'm right? Why am I so convinced they're wrong? So I think it's in that, and I think we've mentioned it before in a different conversation, but that being consciously self-aware. So running that measure of yourself that says, okay, let me understand that, and do I still agree with it? So do I know why I'm doing or saying what I'm doing or saying, and do I agree that that's for the right purpose or for the right reason? Because I think it's we have, as a leader, we have to be our own barometer of that, and recognize that if we aren't being genuine, if we aren't being authentically ourselves, there'll be a reason for that, and that might be a fear, that might be because we're fearful.
Don't believe it.
We don't believe we're not somewhere. But understanding that, being able to spot it and go, okay, what's causing me to do this? Because for me, it is usually as a shield against something. So I'm trying to protect myself from something. And I think for me, one of my greatest leadership lessons was getting comfortable with the uncomfortable, because leadership's uncomfortable. People are uncomfortable. We're messy, emotional human beings that don't follow a path, or at least not all the same path. And therefore, the only truism about leadership is you are going to deal with a lot of uncomfortable situations. So becoming comfortable that you're going to be in your uncomfortable situation, can be such a gift as a leader. I remember the day before doing a massive redundancy program, which is one of the worst things you can ever have to do as a leader.
Yeah.
And I was sat with the board, and they said, "Kim, are we ready?" And I was like, "Ready as we're ever going to be." And they looked horrified, and they're like, "We postpone, should we do this?" And I went, "No, what I mean is I've prepared for everything I can possibly prepare for. The thing I can't prepare for is tomorrow morning, we're going to go and tell 1,800 people that they're at risk of losing their job. I have no idea what that piece of information, when added to the burden they're already carrying in their own life, is going to do.
Yeah.
All I can do is be comfortable with the uncomfortable and hold the space for them to help them across whatever that,
Whatever the challenge will be.
I
And I
think
guess deliver it in an open, honest,
that's it. And
transparent way.
in that space that says nobody is made redundant because they're not a good performer. Nobody. If they were not a good performer, we'd be performance managing them. People are made redundant because the organisation couldn't lead them to a better outcome.
Yes. So again, it comes back to your point about looking at yourself from a negative or positive, and as in, this is not something that they've done, which is a negative. It's about the organisation not doing its job properly, which unfortunately, that the pain sits with you, but it's about the organisation taking responsibility. So don't go away looking at yourself and giving yourself a hard time about it.
That's so true. I mean, I remember doing my first one, standing up there, and the first thing I said to people was, first thing I need you to understand is this is not about you. And let me explain what I mean by that is it's happening to you. You're impacted. You're going to have to live with the outcome of it. But the reason I say it's not about you is you're not here because of anything you did. You're here because, unfortunately, I couldn't lead you to
We
outcome.
got it wrong.
Yeah, I'm genuinely sorry about that. But my job is to save as many jobs as possible. And the reality is either I make the cut or the whole company goes bust. And so the only way I can do my job of saving as many jobs as possible is to make this really tough decision, which is to cut down how many people I've got.
Cut down the numbers we've got, yeah.
Because if not, people make it about them. They think it's because they were a bad performer. They think it's because they weren't doing a good job. And that's never the reason. But we let people think that that's the reason. And then they take that into their future and they start to make it their reality.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, absolutely. And I think you mentioned this earlier. We spend a lot of time also building using assumptions in a really negative way to affect ourselves. And there's a real danger there that you go to the negative assumption as opposed to the positive. And there's a choice you can make. You can choose to look at something as an opportunity, or you can choose to look at it as like a punishment, if you like. And there's almost a choice you can make. I'm going to be confident or I'm not going to be confident. I know that's a really simple thing to say, but there is a choice in there. And it's about, being clear about the steps that enable that to be a positive choice, as in I'm going to be confident, and then being brave enough to take them and not losing that confidence. Because why would you choose not to be confident when you could choose to be confident? Because, that decision has a huge impact on everything. And I think that, that's a really important lesson, but it's a tough lesson. And you have to be, coming back to your point about being comfortable with the uncomfortable, that is a toughie, because it's a hard one, and you have to be really brave it's almost like a physical step forward into something that, as you say, we're not comfortable with. But I mean, in all of that, self-awareness is really important, isn't it? And for you, what does self-awareness look like?
Another great question. So for me, that self-awareness is constantly in the moment. So I'm constantly scanning myself and going, is that true? Is that not true? One of the things that is actually what I did my TEDx on, which is that the opposite of fear is hope, and both of them are created in the same brain. So the thing we're fearful of, the thing that we think is going to go wrong, that could be awful, that could be this disaster, we've had to imagine it. It hasn't happened yet. So we've created it in our brain. The thing we're hopeful of, the thing we think, oh my God, wouldn't it be amazing if that happened? Also hasn't happened yet. We've created it in our brain. So same brain has created both. And yet we choose to believe the thing we're fearful of is more likely and more credible than the thing that we're hopeful
And the thing that,
and yet they were created in the same brain. Neither one of them is more credible or more likely than the other. And so to your point, it is about that choice. So I constantly ask myself that kind of question, which is, why am I so convinced about this?
Yeah.
What evidence is there that I'm right? But equally, what evidence is there that I'm wrong? Because for many years, I would only seek the evidence that I was right. So I was wedded to being correct. So even if the correct that I was that I was hopeless and capable of doing my job, and therefore I'd look for the evidence that proved that to be correct, I'd never look for the evidence to prove the opposite, which allowed me to then make a choice. And for me, that was been my big learn in the last few years, which is our subconscious brain is the happiest little helper we'll ever have, but it comes with a significant flaw. It doesn't understand the difference between help and harm. So whatever we're telling it, it thinks we want. So it goes and gets more evidence. So if I say I'm really rubbish at this, I often use public speaking as one of them. And I've been very lucky to speak around the world, and yet still, whenever anybody else speaks, my little inner voice reminds me that 26 years ago, I stood up in front of about 500 people and told them that one of the charities we were going to support was Imperial Leather, kill yourself. And I meant Imperial Leather. And whilst I've never said anything that stupid since, that is the first thing my brain tells me when somebody says, Kim, you're going to go and talk. So what I've now
that feeling.
Oh my God, that was. But what I now have to say to myself is, can I get it wrong? Is there any evidence that I can get this right? Because then what happens is your subconscious brain will bring back all of those times where people came to speak to you after you'd spoken, or people wrote to you months afterwards to tell you about something they'd achieved as a result of taking action because of something you'd said in that speech. So then you can look at it and go, okay, I can get it wrong, epically wrong. But I can also get it right. So based with this new fact set, what choice am I going to make? Am I going to that I could get it right again in the future? So I'm going to be brave enough to take the chance. I think for me, it's having some of those practical elements that allow us to just, I guess, route adjust. Again, like we're heading in the wrong direction. And it doesn't have to be a massive swing. We often think that tiny little insignificant step isn't going to make a difference. But often in times of real crisis, of which over the years, I've been given a few, whether that's in career or illnesses or various other things, in those moments of crisis, taking the step, the small, insignificant step, the one, and if you just keep taking those, before you know it, you've got through. And you're like, what? We overcame them. And
you actually, what I found with small steps, I found them really powerful because we all feel better when we take an action. So just rather than, procrastinating, to take a step, it's positive in itself. It builds up confidence because if we achieve the step and it's not such a big step, so you've got in the start point, you've got a better chance of achieving it. You see the outcome, you get the feedback quickly, you build up momentum, and as you say, that starts to gather pace and you stop thinking about all of these other things because you've got to concentrate on the step. So you're in the moment. And I think that there's a real value in that, and breaking things down into bite-sized chunks and getting feedback. Feedback's really important, isn't it? And good feedback. And it's something as a coach that I think, certainly when I'm working with my clients, it's something that I feel a way that I can really add value to what they're trying to achieve. And to your point about a choice, how do we change their start point from, oh, I can't do this, to let's be really clear what these steps are and believe in the process. So
Mm.
almost stop thinking about the outcome, what's the process, and taking some satisfaction from going along that journey. And again, those small steps are really important. And having someone to play that off against, to be
Yeah.
challenged and held accountable to it. So to your point about the uncomfortable, that's something. But also to validate and to confirm again that actually what we're doing is good. So stick with it.
Yeah. It's so true because we can't see our own blind spots for a reason. We're blind to them. And so can't. It's been because I've got a coach. They're like, well, shouldn't I just go to your coach? Well, you can do. I've got a coach not necessarily because they're better than me, because I can't see my own blind spots. So I
Yeah.
need somebody who can stand outside of me and help me to identify the blind spots, shine a light on them, so that I can take action to fix them and become a better version of myself. And also take those moments to celebrate the small wins, because we just concentrate on them. And I was definitely, definitely. One of my challenges was you get your 360 at the end of the year, and be glowing, and then I'd have one person that'd say one tiny little thing where I'd upset them, and that'd be the thing I'd focus on, and my boss would be like,
You remember that? Yeah.
seriously, people would pay to have the glowing feedback that you've got, and you're only focused on this. And I had one boss once who said to me, I've never met anybody who beats themselves up as often and as harshly as you. And if it weren't for the fact it was so tragic, it'd be a key skill. I mean, that's feedback. And it didn't kick in until a couple of years later. But actually, sometimes we need people outside of us to be able to say what they see and where they see
Yeah.
this. And say, I'm very, very lucky that I've worked with coaches and as a coach for 8 years now, because it's good to have that external perspective for you to then go, oh, okay, is that how I'm showing up? Because if we end up, we see ourselves on video and things, and we go, I can knock us out like that. Well, yeah, you don't. Yeah, you do. It's just not how you see it in your head. And having somebody like a coach who can help you with that in the decisions you're making, in the way you're leading your team, in the where there are the opportunities to give people more permission to be part of the solution, can make life so much more successful, can't it?
Yeah. Absolutely. Just communication's really important, isn't it? And the whole thing around trust and communication. And as a leader, one of the things that is really important is about how you communicate with others. And I think this probably comes back to a couple of the examples you were giving earlier about, an honest leader who might have a step that they take that isn't necessarily a great step, but actually that's what it's a consistent step. But that clarity of communication is really important. And from your experience, and also in your role as a leader, what practical steps can leaders take to be transparent? Because transparent, I mean, it actually comes back to your experience there that you were talking about redundancy and the like. It's so important.
Yeah, it is. It's so important. And communication really is critical. And I think when we think about conflict, in my opinion, conflict always comes down to one of three things: miscommunication,
Yeah.
or misunderstanding. And the way to fix is communicating better. And I think it's being able to share that. And sometimes we shy away from that. I worked in I worked in public companies for lots of years, and in those you come with some challenges. You cannot share information with people in the organization before you've shared it with the market, out of trust for them, because if you do share it beforehand, they're at risk of insider trading. But we don't share that with people. So so again, a similar situation. It was actually a redundancy piece. I had to share with people like, this sort of information I can't tell you, and I'm not telling you because I don't trust you. I'm not telling you because I care about you. and I don't. So I think sometimes it's giving people the why. We can only give them so much information, so that they understand this isn't about lack of care or lack of trust. This is about caring for them and making sure that you're keeping them safe, and that you're following rules. So that, because as leaders, we have to follow rules that our people don't necessarily understand. And for years and years ago, I used to run a complaints part for the bank. And what I used to find was people go, "Oh, I'm supposed to run customer X today." And I said, "I've had an answer. I'm not going to answer. I'm not going to call." It's like, call them. And say, "I said I'd call you today with an answer. I'm calling you, but I've got no answer." Yes. And they know that you're working on it. You've not forgotten them, and they're still important. And that's the same whether that's your client or whether that's your colleague or whether that be a business partner or a regulator. Have the conversation. Let people know. If you've not got the answer yet, talk to them first, because I promise it'll be better than if you just avoid them, because then they're going to be annoyed because they've had to chase you. So they felt unvalued and they felt unlistened to. So I think for me, one of the key things about communication is that you can never do too much. So one of the things that I did for many, many years on a Friday was called Reflections of the Week. And I used to send a little email out to my team, reflecting on the week, a little bit about what I'd done. I'd ask their team leaders to share with me things people had done, so I could put those bits in. And I went to one organization as an interim. So it was fractional for 6 months. And I put it in place there that the organization had got like really poor communication and it was quite a fractious culture when I started it. And the thing that they wanted most when I left was to carry on the reflections of the week, because they felt connected. And but what I got from some of the other leaders was, "Kim, do you know how much work it is?" I said, "You've written it myself for 6 months. I've had to drag information out of all of you guys every single week." And I remember talking to some of the leaders and saying, "Oh, have you got anything that your team have done this week for me?" The Thursday night I used to do it. I used to write it at home. And they're like, "Oh, no, nothing this week." I'm like, "Okay. Should I just not pay them then?" And they were like, "Sorry. Oh, if they've not done any at all that's worthy of a thank you, have they done anything that's worthy of their wages?" They're like, "Well, they've worked hard." Brilliant. Tell me that then.
Well, let's put that message in. Absolutely.
Take a moment to reflect on what they've done that you're grateful for. And that's probably my number one lesson as a leader, is taking a moment at minimum of every week, but I try and do it every day, of saying, what have my team done that I'm grateful for today? And have I told them?
Yeah.
Because what happens is, and I think often this is very much as British, we're dreadful at feedback. If we give somebody positive feedback, we'll say something like, "Great job." You can take that. But no, I'm brilliant. I told him you did a great job. Aren't I brilliant? If you got something wrong, I'll tell you where you were, what you did.
I'll give you the absolutely the written report on it. Yeah.
And you don't do the same on the positive, which means people dread feedback. Feedback is something which no one wants. If somebody says, "I've got some feedback for you," we don't go, "Yay, bring it up." And we're like, "Oh, in trouble."
Well, I mean, feedback. It's we almost write it ourselves in a big corporate because no one wants to do it, because it comes to a point in the year and you need to do it for your performance review or whatever. So you have to go round to people and say, "Oh, can you give me some feedback?" And they say, "Oh, can you give me some feedback?" So you end up writing it yourself, and then you say to them, "Are you okay with that?" They do the same, or they say, "What do you want me to put in it?" So it's so not feedback, and it's so much further along the line from the moment when the feedback would be really valuable. I mean, it's really interesting, that point you mentioned, because I've been working in a corporate for a client over the last few months, and one of the big things is lack of communication.
You
Done the rounds and gone out to leaders of different functions and different departments and capability. And the feedback was, there's a void, basically. We only ever hear when something's happened, but we don't hear, the bad news, or even when things are not happening. So your example is a really good one. And the other bit that has come through is getting a leader to actually commit to that is a tricky one, because the minute they commit, they have to do it. Because, you stand up and you go, right, thinking about reflections of the week, as a leader, I'm going to share some insight or some feedback on a weekly basis. I'm going to celebrate our successes. I'm going to highlight the learnings and all that sort of stuff, which is really important. The minute you stand up there and commit to do it, you've got to do it, because you lose credibility. And why would people bother doing their bit if you don't bother doing your bit? So, and there's also the risk of failure, because when you commit to something, you might not always get it right. So again, it comes back to your point about being comfortable with the uncomfortable. I've set this target. I've told everyone about it. Now I need to hold myself accountable to it. And if I don't, everybody else will, and they'll lose their trust and, support for me. And how can I get them to do the same? So it's a really important thing now, I think. And it's
so right. And it is about that commitment. I mean, I remember doing it in one organization, and I was the only one doing it, which was fine. It was about my people. And then other people in the organization found out about it and like, well, could you copy us in? Because that would be quite interesting. We'd love to know what's going on. So I was like, yeah, I can. And then I started to get feedback going, it's very operations driven, Kim. And I was like, but I'm the COO. Of course, it's operations driven. I'm the chief operating officer. It's like, I look after.
it's about strategy.
Yeah. And then, well, we've done this in our team. And I was like, okay, well, maybe we need to talk to the wider leadership group about making a broader newsletter. Because what I can't do is take on the ownership of finding out everything that's going on in the entire organization and writing the reflection. Because that would make me a communications person. I've got a job to communicate. But it demonstrated how much people wanted it. And I think for me, one of the things I used to joke that, I made a career out of asking the dim girl questions. But literally for the last 15 years, I've done transformational change. One of the first things I do, and I highly recommend it to any leader, is go and talk to your people at their desk where they are and ask them, what's the daftest thing we make you do? What do we make you do every day that you're just like, what on earth? I said, because I guarantee you will improve efficiency immediately.
Yes.
They think we know what they're doing. And actually, it'll be something that's just crept in over time and has become part of what we do around here. And they're the biggest drivers of your efficiency. But what it also does is opens the door, come and give you feedback. Because that's one of the things I've seen and I went in one organization, and I never saw a senior leader leave the senior floor unless they were in a pair. They never left on their own. They always of people surrounded by their team or something. I said, so you don't become approachable. If you go down I used to go down to the canteen and I'd make an aim chat with people like, oh, you have an assistant, which I was going to be good today and have an apple, but have a bite for me. You just make yourself accessible.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
What we're getting wrong. Because we think that communication should always be in that structured way. I'm gonna structure, I'm gonna tell you, and there's gonna be set times. But actually, I think for me, one of the key parts of learning to be an authentic leader was being willing to be human first.
Yeah.
And that took some courage, because that isn't what everybody else was doing. Everybody else was being a persona. And I'd been that persona for so many years, badly. So trying to be this thing that I assumed were. That actually, once I went into the fact that I remember I was CEO at the time, going and sitting next to somebody on the phone, just to chat. And he looked horrified. He was like, I can't talk to you, you're really important. And I was like, they're so silly. It's not important. We're all important. We're all equally important. I've got a job to do. If I get that wrong, we've got a problem. You've got a job to do. You get that wrong, we've got a problem. And last time I checked, you cut me, I bleed. I'm pretty certain if I cut you, you'll bleed. Please don't tell HR and threaten to cut you. Which point he started laughing and he was like, oh my God, you're like really normal, aren't you? I was like, I'm just a human. We're the same. We just have a different job, but each are equally important. As in, if you can't talk to me, I've got a real problem because you are the eyes and ears of the organization. You're at the front line. You're the one that's really what's going on there. And so if I become so distanced from that you can't share with me when things are going well and when things are going badly, I can't lead the organization to the best possible outcome because I've created blind spots.
No, actually, it's a really good scenario there that you've shared. I was working with a client who she stepped into a leadership role in a new organization. And for the first sort of quarter, if you like, the first 90 days, she made it her priority to get as many one-to-ones in as possible. Her direct reports were going to have lots and lots of one-to-one, but she was also going to go broader than that, a little bit like, your example of going down to the canteen and really asking questions and being visible and showing an interest. So she spent a long time doing that, getting out to reach as many people as possible. And in doing that as well, it was about showing, who she was and what her values were and her vulnerabilities as well, and the things that she perhaps was not so comfortable with. And then asking the questions about what thing could we change? And then picking out some quick wins from that and actually going up and making them happen. And all of those things, they really created a strong bond with everybody because people trusted her. They could see straight away that she had a vested interest in making it better, not just for the organization, but for them. When they shared some feedback, with the quick wins, they could see that she listened and then she picked out those that were achievable, but also gave some feedback on those that perhaps in the moment weren't, but they were going to be part for the period. And then at the point in time when it might be appropriate, we'll review them. And all of those things, while simple steps, created such a strong bond so that then, for the onwards from the 90 days, she had a really collaborative team, and not just the team, but the whole sort of organization, all going in the right direction. There's two-way communication, there's relationships, there's trust, there's people who've identified with her, and they trust her in the sense of, her commitment to making it better. And as I say, not just for the organization, but for her. And often you get a new leader who goes in and immediately feels they have to change everything because they've got to be seen to be having all the answers, which is exactly what you don't want to do.
Yeah. And I think it's having the courage to say, I don't know. I remember being in one organization and somebody asking me a question on day one. And I was like, okay, I can give you my opinion, but it will be my opinion. It won't be the answer. And I will do that because I'm not going to share that. But then let me go away and get you the answer, and then I'll bring the answer back and we'll both learn. Because I know, and they were like, well, that's a breath of fresh air because most people will just tell us what the answer is. And I think it's that it's given people confidence that they're going to know where they stand. So that can be, we can't do this for this reason. So you can't do that. You might not understand why we have to do it this way, but there's a regulatory reason, or there's a this. So it's not that we're not listening. It's just there's this that you're not aware of that we need to. I think sometimes context is always king. So some of the changes that people want you to make take a long time. And so they told you what they needed doing, but by the time you make the change, they've forgotten that they told you. So, one of the things that I found super helpful in most organizations is doing the you said we did. So whenever we want a change, that you said this, we've done this, here's the change. Because it reminds them, oh yeah, it's because you were listening to me. It might not be such a big problem now, but it was a big problem months ago. And it was an IT change, and therefore it needed to be built. It wasn't something we could just fix overnight.
You have to go and get ready straight away, yeah.
Or our customer said, and therefore we've done. So giving people the context of the communication, I think, can really help a leader in the impact that communication has, because often we don't give people the context, and therefore the communication doesn't land because they don't understand where it's come from or why it's coming.
Yeah. Kim, I'm just conscious of time, and there's I could keep talking to you there's lots there, and I'd love to, carry on, but I'm conscious that you've got other things to go on and do, and but it's been a great time this morning, just listening to your insight, and there's such a richness there, that anyone listening will really be able to grasp. And as I said earlier, practical steps that they could pick up quickly. And, just thinking about reflections of the week, if someone had heard that, and obviously the context around it, as you mentioned, you could go and put it into practice next week. It's not you could really, and it would have a quick impact. It would have a visible impact, and it would build up momentum. So there's some really great practical examples that you've shared today. Certainly for me and for the others that were listening, I'll be able to take some of those away and put them into practice or share them with my clients. So a very big thank you for that, and wonderful, wonderful journey that you've been on. I hope your daughter has a great 8th birthday. I'm sure she will. But I will, at the end of the podcast, Kim, I'll share your details. So if there's anybody who wants to reach out to you or get in touch, then they'll have those details. And I'll just say to anyone listening, give me a shout. My details will come up. If there's any questions you've got about the podcast or anything that we've covered, if you want to have a chat about coaching and the value of coaching, and you've got any interest there, then get in touch and we can talk that through. I'd be delighted to do that. And then also future podcasts. So this is going to be we'll get into a regular cadence. And if you'd like to register and make sure that you're made aware of those in the future, then again, give me a shout and we'll get you booked in for those. But thank you to everyone today, and a very big thank you to you, Kim. Really appreciate your time and input. Great stuff. So appreciate that. Take care.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Leadership and Lead podcast. I hope you found value in today's conversation and are inspired to take action on your own journey. To dive deeper, I invite you to complete the Leadership Self-Assessment. This is a powerful tool designed to help you gain insight into your strengths, identify areas for growth, and take the next step in your personal and professional development. You can access the assessment directly by scanning the QR code on the screen or visiting stellacoach.co.uk/self-assessment. And don't forget to follow our guests. You'll find their contact information below to learn more about their work and insights. And of course, if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to the Leadership and Lead podcast for more inspiring conversation. And I'll look forward to seeing you in the next episode as we continue to unleash your potential.